All right, we're live. And actually, hold on one second. Awesome. Awesome. All right, we are live now. Good to see you, Jen. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. So, welcome back to the Thought Cloud podcast. We tell the story of an inspiring student to inspire other students. Today, we have Jen Hall. Jen and I were actually in the same years at Berkeley. She's done so much above and beyond. She studied molecular and cellular biology there. She went on to do research at Stanford. Now she is at Duke's Med School, where she is, well, we're going to figure out exactly what she's doing there and where she hopes to go. But she's done a lot. She's done so much, and we're going to hear about her path, where she hopes to go, what she's learned along the way. And Jen, it's awesome to have you on today. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. I'm really excited.
Absolutely. So let's start Berkeley. 2017, freshman, you're getting into the school. How did you decide Berkeley was the school that you wanted to be at?
Yeah, I think so. I was an out of state Berkeley gal, so I think that was rather uncommon because majority I think do come from California. But I grew up for the most part in Colorado, and so it was kind of I knew I wanted to leave the area that I grew up in just to kind of branch out and experience something new. And I think Berkeley was kind of the epitome of experiencing something new. You know, it's so diverse. There's a lot going on at any given moment, and I really, really liked that. I think it really just kind of came down to it being the perfect blend of kind of, again, like I said, that diversity in kind of in every aspect of the word, as well as you get a little bit more of that stereotypical college experience than you do at a lot of kind of higher academic institutions, just because, you know, there's still like a really fun football team, whether or not we're super great, that's debatable. And I kind of
Yeah.
liked that stereotypical college experience picture a little bit. And so that was part of my decision.
Absolutely. No, that's wonderful. So that was part of your decision going into it from Colorado. Whereabouts in Colorado were you from?
Yeah, Colorado Springs, which is south of Denver, about an
Very
hour.
nice. Very nice. And you studied or not molecular cellular, but was it molecular and cellular? Yeah, biology.
Molecular and cellular, yeah, it's MCB is kind of the the go-to. So molecular and
MCB.
cellular
Gotcha,
biology.
gotcha. Yeah, I know. There's some other schools that have that similar major. It's a bigger mouthful. So molecular and cellular. And how did you decide that? Was that something you knew going into, your application? That's what you wanted to study?
You know, I was a little uncertain. I think even then I knew I wanted to go to medical school after.
Okay.
I kind of wavered on that a little bit at the start, but I knew that the molecular and cell biology major was a great avenue that, you know, essentially checked all those boxes in terms of prereqs for medical school and kind of preparing you for that. But I also, you know, I'm very interested in biology in general, and the molecular and cellular biology major lets you kind of subspecialize or kind of emphasize in a different area. And so I chose neurobiology,
Oh, wow.
which, yeah, which was great. And I think it, particularly in undergrad, it can get easy to kind of get caught up in the classes you have to take, and they may not be that interesting to you. But the neurobiology route kind of allowed me to take classes that I was actually interested in while still kind of fulfilling those pre medical prereqs and stuff.
Absolutely. How many different routes could you have chosen from? Could you make as many up under the sun, or was it just a preset a la carte kind of menu?
Yeah, so I think there's 6 or 7 maybe areas of emphasis that you can choose. I know immunology is one, maybe genetics is another, and so there's several, but they're all kind of pre-laid out study plans, and there's different, you know, routes you can take even within those, but
Well,
I liked kind of that flexibility.
yeah, and the neuro side of it. The neuro side stood out. Why? And did neuroscience always stand out to you, or was that okay? I'm in campus. I'm kind of exploring. I know I want to go to med school, but the neuro stuff is really neat. Is that kind of how that all unfolded?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I think the brain is, you know, probably by far the most fascinating area of the human body, and just a very, very fascinating area of study because we know so little about it.
Right.
And so it was always kind of exciting. Um, and so I was kind of gravitated towards that from the beginning and didn't really regret it as I continued to learn more about it. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, there's so much to dig into on that campus, and it's neat to see how much people can dive into it. And I'm sure you felt that as well at Cal. It was like, wow, there are some people that are very, very focused on these very particular things. And they're, it makes you more curious about what you're doing, I think, at the end of the day, right? Because you get to share that knowledge and feel like, okay, wow, this is a great community to be a part of. So, at Cal, you were also able to be a part of a really neat research lab. So, tell us about the SON lab, because I think am I saying that correctly? SON?
Yes, it's kind of like Son, like John, but with an S.
Okay, Son like
Uh,
John. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, that really cool stuff. Stem cell and cancer research.
Yes, yes.
Tell us about
So
that.
yeah, so there's a ton of different research opportunities at Berkeley, as there are, at many undergraduate institutions. And so getting involved can be challenging at times, but once you're kind of in and you find yourself in kind of a good environment with the principal investigator or PI is kind of whoever leads the lab. And Lydia Son is the one who leads the Son lab, obviously. And she is wonderful, wonderful, just a great mentor. And so I was drawn to it for that reason. I saw her give a presentation and then kind of approached her afterwards.
Hmm.
And so it ended up just being kind of a little bit spontaneous, a little bit kind of, I forget the wording exactly, but it kind of honestly was a little bit lucky too, to kind of have that happenstance meeting work out so well. But I stayed there from my freshman year until I graduated. And so it was
Oh,
just a great environment and a great opportunity to kind of earn greater independence in terms of the kind of projects I got involved with.
what does that mean? And more independence in the projects you got involved with. For those that don't know how labs work, what does that actually mean?
Yeah, so I guess it kind of depends on your experience, but for those who are kind of trying to get involved in research, there are labs where you will get super, super great hands-on experience, and then there are labs where you'll maybe have someone over your shoulder a little bit more, which is also worthwhile in terms of learning new things.
Hmm.
But if you are able to find kind of an environment where undergrads are given more independence to kind of explore things they're interested in, that can be, in my opinion, more formative because you're able to kind of explore things that are interesting to you. So, kind of as you go, you'll build rapport with whoever you're working with in the research lab. And so, in my case, it was with my PI and with the graduate students that I worked alongside. And so I got to the point where we were all kind of bouncing ideas off of each other at our weekly meetings. And so I oftentimes kind of got to follow my own trains of thought in terms of setting up experiments. And eventually down the line, I completed a thesis in that lab, which was very kind of just independent study driven. So,
Wow.
um, yeah.
Wow, wow, wow. And so, as you're doing your independent studies, independent research, it's still aligning with that common theme of what the lab is working towards, correct?
Yes. So you can
So,
imagine within the stem cell slash cancer biology lab, there's like a million projects that can be going on, just like there are a million things going on in all of those research facets. So, for example, within our lab, there were projects and graduate students working on kind of diagnostic tools for cancer. Um, there were other kind of graduate students and teams working to rather than on the diagnostic side, more so on the treatment side. And so there's can be a lot going on in any given lab. And so being able to kind of drive your own areas of interest is really fun and I guess formative.
absolutely, absolutely. And especially having that group of people around you that can, again, like we were talking about earlier, bounce ideas off of each other. And hey, am I looking at this the right way? This is what I'm saying. Well, hey, over here, what I'm saying is this. And I'm sure there's a lot of that crisscross as well. Did that help the work ultimately at the end of the day?
Yeah, definitely. I think that was one of the first spaces where I got to see kind of the less formal collaboration between groups. So I know, in classes you can do like group projects and stuff like that, but this
Right.
was kind of, like friends or at least colleagues getting to be like, hey, what do you think about this experiment? I can't get it to work. Any thoughts? And so it was just really cool to see people so like-minded, kind of driving different areas of that research.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you did that from, did you say sophomore or freshman year all the way through?
Yeah, I started in the Sun Lab the second semester of my freshman year,
Good
which
for
is I think
you.
honestly a little earlier than like is
Than a lot of
necessary.
people. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of people don't get research for until they're maybe upperclassmen, I think. And I know
Yeah,
how
well,
competitive it is there, right? Remember the surf applications and you like put it in, you think, well, fingers crossed, do a little
yeah.
song and dance. But yeah, good for you meeting her and building that relationship. I always think I've seen that work again and again where people actually have something beyond just I sent in an application, and they
Right.
really relate to that work. Why were you at that talk to begin with? What was the talk on? Do you remember?
Yeah, so I think I took a seminar style course in my first semester of freshman year. And so they basically just cycled through different researchers to kind of talk about what's going on, just because Berkeley is so, there's so much going on all the time. And so it was a very diverse class. One week it would be like very engineering heavy, another week it would be kind of like social sciences. And then Dr. San came in, and I was like, this is very interesting to me. I really like basic oncology research, which is what one of the focuses of her lab is. And so, after the talk, I was just like, hello, I let me introduce myself and tell you why you should let me come to your lab group meeting, which is kind of just a weekly session where they debrief. And really anyone can kind of hop in on those. I think most of them are probably via Zoom now. So that's a good way to kind of get your foot in the door if for people who are trying to explore research or get involved early. Um, just saying, can I come to a research meeting and hear more about what's happening is a good way to do that.
Absolutely. That's actually a really natural, transition to get to know a group. And I haven't heard anyone really give that before. Um, I've heard, hey, go and send the email. I've heard, hey, try to meet them somewhere. But like, actually, hey, let's sit in while you're in your natural environment. Let me see if I can blend, kind of thing. That's really neat. Good stuff. Good stuff. So you did your thesis there. You got out of Berkeley with your degree, and you knew med school was in the picture. Did you think it was immediately after? Did you think there was going to be some time between? Or how did you anticipate those next couple of years?
Yeah, so kind of one of the big hurdles to get over is after you've gotten your degree, you got to fit in your MCAT if you're going to go to medical
Right.
school. And so for me, I initially started along the lines thinking I would take the MCAT during my senior year. And then I realized that I really did not think I was not compatible with my last year in undergrad and wanting to just, get to experience that as a human being and not as a robot that had to go from class to research lab to studying for 6 hours.
Right.
So it was not super compatible. So I ended up basically if taking the MCAT during your final semester would mean you take one gap year automatically, just because the medical school application process is a full year itself. Um, and so I ended up taking two gap years because I pushed my MCAT to kind of at the start of the first gap year. And
Gotcha.
I have no regrets on that. I think it can be stressful to make those decisions because everyone is kind of in a rush to get from A to B to C to, become a physician or whatever. But I have no regrets on that decision for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So this is a little subtle strategy point that you just mentioned there. So taking the MCAT right as you graduate that year versus waiting a couple of years. You can take it at that in that senior year time and still wait a couple of years. And I've seen that approach, right? Where it's like, hey, we
Absolutely.
took it, maybe we applied, didn't get in, gonna do some medical scribe work or whatever have
Mhm.
you, right? And then I'm gonna reapply or just wait a couple of years after I get some more experience. Do you suggest taking it right before you apply, like in that cycle right before? Is there any strategy to that at all? Because it'd be interesting if there was.
Yeah, I don't think there's any strategy necessarily in, when you take it, as long as when you do take it, you feel prepared, right? So
Mm,
if you're studying and you're not feeling comfortable and you're not quite getting those practice scores that you want, there's no rush to take it. I think in general, I tend to be a person that's not super rushed to get to where I'm going. So, for medical school, that means I was okay taking those two gap years versus one versus zero. Um, and same with training for to become a physician is very long even after medical school. So I think pacing myself so that I'm okay with in my decisions now and able to be enjoying my senior year of undergrad, for example,
right.
um, is something I don't regret and something I would kind of recommend for people who are kind of wavering as to their
Absolutely.
timeline. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think about my brother. You said pacing yourself, and he just went straight shot, right? And I'm like, no pace. You have you have no pace, buddy. Enjoy, breathe. Smell the roses.
It
Um,
works for some people, and some people, are like just able to rapidly get things knocked out. But for me, I'm more of a smell the roses type, or maybe it's mandatory because I just can't force myself to be kind of wake up all day work sleep. So it might be a personal thing,
well,
but
no, I like that approach. I'm probably more in line with you on that, but that's wonderful. So you had those couple of years between. You went to Stanford School of Medicine, and you were able to do research there. You were a research coordinator, and then something before that, a fellow as well. So what does that mean for people? Fellow. What is a fellow?
Yeah, so I was part of the Comet Fellowship, which beyond being at Stanford, I think there's a couple sister institutions now that have similar programs. I know Cleveland Clinic does, but essentially, the Comet Fellowship is a chance to spend a year where you get to scribe and kind of get research experiences in various departments around the hospital. And so I chose the radiation oncology department because, again, I wanted to be kind of in close proximity to oncology research and cancer patients. And so I spent my first year out of undergrad as a Comet Fellow and scribing in clinic 3 times a week. And then kind of those other 2 days were kind of flexible to do research. And I really, really enjoyed that experience. I would recommend it to anyone who's kind of considering what to do with those gap years if they want more clinical and experience in patient interactions. It was wonderful, wonderful for that.
Absolutely. And so Stanford's program, getting into that, what does that look like? And you said there's a few others around the country. So maybe generally speaking, how do you get into these fellowship programs? Is it always a fellowship program when people are going and being inscribed and doing research? Or are people sometimes just doing that themselves? Seems like this program made it all happen pretty easily. Not easily, but put it all together for you so you
Yeah,
could do it
yeah,
all.
that's a good question because I think it can be confusing, like what's kind of an organized thing and what's more just going out and getting a part of a research lab and then shadowing somewhere else and then scribing somewhere else. So both are possible. The Comet Fellowship, like you kind of hinted at, is more like bundled, organized. You'll have your schedule and the physicians that you're shadowing with, and you'll have kind of opportunities where they help you ask for research and help you kind of navigate applying to conferences and submitting papers and things like that. Whereas you can do the same exact thing in kind of a less organized way where you're just kind of reaching out to people on your own, which is also totally worthwhile and can be very productive too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's an application that you send in to that comment program?
Yes, yeah. So it's like an application pretty quick, honestly. And you don't need to have all this profound clinical experience. I don't think I was kind of in the cohort of undergrads that graduated with kind of only 2.5 real years of school, and then the other 1.5, or I guess 3.5, do you wanna, whatever. My last 1.5 years was during COVID, so clinical opportunities were pretty scarce for a good reason.
Oh, yeah.
And so, you don't have to have all of these crazy experiences. It's more about gaining it once you're in the program and speaking to why you want that in the first place. And so it's just a quick application. I think there's an interview process, but again, it's not nothing too painful. And then, once you're in, you're matched with your different mentors, and you're hit the ground running in clinic.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Well, that is great that you're able to do that program and that they make it so they facilitate it so well. I think in terms of how that's prepared you for where you are now, how do you feel like that structure's added to your sense of understanding of, yes, this is maybe the kind of doctor I want to be? And we haven't even gone there yet, which is what kind of doctor you want to be. I think you've said physician, but I don't know, generally speaking, where you're hoping to go. So let's touch on that.
Yeah, so I will say the Comet Fellowship and kind of just any kind of scribing plus research plus clinical time experience will really be pretty formative, or at least it was for me. In that, I think I want to go into, I'm still not certain because I'm going to let kind of things play out in med school and see what I like next year when I'm rotating more so with patients. But I think I do want to go into oncology and kind of treating cancer patients. And so getting to be in that environment with clinicians who have been doing it for so many years was super, super impactful for me, particularly navigating kind of those challenging interactions with patients and their families when you don't necessarily have the best news to share,
Oh my
right? Like
gosh.
that's a very important skill set to have as a physician and just as a good human, to be able to be there for people when times are tough, and also to get to share excitement when you do have good news and times are good, right? So it's a lot, and it was great to kind of learn to navigate those conversations and those experiences with people who have been doing it, successfully for so many years.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You're totally right about the compassion aspect there and how much that actually takes as a human to deliver that news. And I know that there's sometimes you'll be seeing a patient for years and years and years and years and years. And there could be that time when you've got to deliver some terrible news that they're like your family almost, or like you're really close friends. You've got to see their whole path. That's just got to be real tough. But I think, like you said, the good news is probably just so relieving to give when you get to see them walk out. And we've had a couple of friends go through that, so we've been lucky on that sense. But boy, oh
Mm.
boy, oncology, you've been focusing on it a lot. Undergraduate, now again, you're digging into it further. Why has that stood out to you? Is there something that really strikes a reason why it really strikes an interest for you?
Yeah, so I think just intellectually, I've always really been fascinated by kind of cancer and the treatment just because it's so complicated and it's a problem. Obviously, everyone wants to find this cure to cancer, but I think it's not so much as wandering around the rainforest or whatever and finding like the magical plant that cures cancer, right? I think that that's kind of the vision sometimes from outside of oncology research is that, oh, there's this key that we just haven't found yet. But once you see how complex and how diverse cancer is just as a disease, it can be very daunting, but also it's very, very fascinating to see, if we do this little fix, it can improve survival this much. If, we keep incrementally improving survival for patients, that's slowly taking steps towards a cure rather than, which is more realistic than kind of wandering around
Right.
and finding this magic cure. And I will say I've had some personal experiences. My dad had cancer. And so, I think when you do have kind of that shared experience with patients, it can help you be more empathetic to the kind of that shared experience that you have. And so that was very impactful as well to kind of me figuring out what I wanted to do right off the bat in research as an undergrad. And then realizing just how well I fit into that kind of realm was another kind of confirmation too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, as far as it goes with cancer, is there any particular type that you find yourself focusing on more than others, that you'd like to maybe focus on more than others?
Yeah, that's tough. I will say again, very much open to kind of what the whims of a medical career can do because oftentimes it can be kind of spontaneous and serendipitous in a way. But like I said, I did study neuro in undergrad, and so I'm kind of interested in that intersection of maybe like brain tumors or involvement of the nervous system in some way. But again, I think it's also as a physician or an oncologist, you can treat as as I guess as broad of a patient population as you want or as narrow,
Hmm.
depending on your interests. And so you could treat people who have brain tumors and have prostate cancer. Like it can be very diverse, or you can just treat a very specific subset. And so I
Got
haven't quite decided where I fall on that spectrum yet. But
Gotcha, gotcha. And I know that it gets crazy. I remember just a year ago, my brother just went through his final. I think they finished with rotations. There's so many complicated processes, I feel like, that a medical student has to go through. But it was his last year. He figured out his specialty. And I remember all of his friends talking about how much it really took for them to decide and all of these different subsets they could choose from. So, as far as it goes with oncology, eh, you know, what do you have to do to choose one or stay broad? What does that look like as a medical student?
yeah, so as a student, the good news is like there's not much to do. Same with you're an undergrad
Okay.
and you're in pre-medical, right? Just let yourself get experiences and things that you're interested in. Don't try and pigeonhole yourself into something you think you're interested in and then jump ship later. Just kind of let what your passions are in any given moment drive kind of that decision making into what research projects you do and stuff like that. Because I think an answer in terms of ruling something out is just as valuable as an answer of being like, this is something that's definitely an interest, right? And so I think it definitely, once you're in medical school, becomes kind of like, oh my gosh, why don't I know exactly what I want to do? Because I should start my residency application tomorrow and make sure that everything on there is super applicable to this very niche field, right? That can
Right.
be kind of stressful, but it's also unrealistic. And there are very few people who come into med school knowing what they want to do and actually follow through on that. I think there can be a lot of evolution of kind of who you are as a person and your interests. Um, and so at Duke, at least, and at a couple other medical schools, you do your rotations in your second year. And so you kind of have some time to navigate things during that clinical, very heavy clinical exposure. And many decisions are oftentimes made then. And then you kind of have an extra year to do some research in that area if you want to make it more applicable to your residency application. But I think my kind of thinking is like, don't stress yourself out too much because if you're, like I am now in my first year, it's very much just didactics and classes. And there
Hmm.
are still patient interactions, but it's not quite the same as rotating through all these different specialties and getting exposure. And so I'm not going to stress myself out too much until I actually have that exposure, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think that's the right way to do it. And in letting yourself explore and see things and not, like you said, not pigeonholing yourself. And as it kind of to press on that cancer question a little bit more, though, is there a particular, is it just oncology as a specialty as your medical schooling goes before residency? Or do you get into residency and say, okay, I want to focus on prostate specifically, or colon, or neuro, or can you combine
Yeah,
them there? When does that all decide? Like, when does it happen when you decide what you're trying to
yeah.
study or focus on?
Great question. So, actually, you when you go to residency, for majority of oncology specialties, you don't even choose oncology when you choose residency. So, for example, if you want within oncology, there is surgical oncology, so people who are going in and doing surgery to remove tumors and things like that. There's medical oncology who prescribe chemotherapies and other therapies that help kind of get rid of cancer through drugs.
Hmm.
And then there's radiation oncology, which is where you deliver radiation very targeted towards a tumor, and that helps to is basically like surgery, but without needing to cut the patient open and take the tumor out.
Right.
And so there are these three fields which are often kind of confused or merge into one. And then there's like many, oops, sorry about that. There are many peripheral fields where you're interacting with cancer patients, but you're not necessarily on this three-pronged team, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so for residency, if you were doing surgical oncology, you would just go into general surgery residency. And then after that, you do a fellowship to differentiate yourself into oncology. And then after that, you can specialize into a certain area like prostate, like,
Wow. Wow, wow,
yeah.
wow,
So,
wow. So that medical program is usually 4 years, and then you go into your
right.
residency, and then you can do the fellowship after that.
Yes. And that's
And-
the typical route. Radiation oncology has its own residency. So that's 5 years, and you do radiation for those 5 years, and you don't have to like do a fellowship. Some people still do if they want to be very specific in what they treat.
Mhm.
But yeah.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. Well, that's, I mean, for such an important matter, it's really cool to see that sort of level of dedication from the people that are going into the space to help address it. So I think that's just impressive, and a big congratulations to you for digging down that path because it's important, and it's going to be fun to see what technologies and what cures come out, or advancements in those cures come out as the years progress, and how cool that you could be at the front line addressing all of those things when that day comes. So that's really cool. Very, very cool. Medical school in general, how has it been different from what you expected going into it?
I would say, shockingly, it's not easier. It's definitely not easier than I thought, but it's not harder. And it's different in that I have more time to be a
Oh,
human than I thought, which
oh,
is
really?
nice.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
really nice.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think in undergrad especially, and also, I was younger and you kind of have that dorm lifestyle a little bit more than you do when you're in graduate school. But
Uh-huh.
um, yeah, I rarely like took the time to do laundry or like clean the kitchen or things like that. Didn't
Yeah.
really, those weren't on my priority list. And now I feel like I have time to do those things, which maybe is a reflection of my own priorities, but also hopefully a reflection that I have a little more time to actually do it. And so, it's been more manageable, more of a balance than I thought it would be. It's definitely still challenging. It's definitely still like drinking water from a fire hose in terms of information that's thrown at you, but it's been great. Yeah.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. And so you got a little bit of the West Coast at Cal and Stanford, and then Duke. Duke is in Annapolis. Is that
North
right?
Carolina.
North
So Durham,
Carolina.
North Carolina, smaller than
Durham.
Annapolis.
What? Oh no, I'm thinking Navy. Why am I? Oh, I'm off. Okay, North Carolina, but still, you're on the East Coast there.
Yes, yeah.
So East Coast versus West Coast versus lifestyle living. What have you noticed as a student being in these different places?
Yeah, so I think I loved Berkeley. I loved the Bay Area. It definitely is kind of what you hear about it. Like, it's super expensive and tough to live there as a student when you're not making any money, or you're not making much money at least. So that was a
Mhm.
challenge, but it does have its benefits in that it's so beautiful, it's so diverse. It's kind of got that California lifestyle with the Silicon Valley high speed craziness, which is which is fun sometimes. And Durham in North Carolina, where Duke is a lot different. It's cost of living is far, far friendlier.
Nice.
Pace of life is just way slower, which is, in my opinion, I like it for my time of life, right? Like I think
Right.
if I were in New York City or in San Francisco for medical school, I'm sure I would love it and have nothing bad to say. But I think having now lived kind of this nice, maybe slower pace of lifestyle, I can go to the grocery store and have parking, right? Like I can
Right. Oh
do
my
these things and
gosh.
it's a little bit less inconvenient, right? And you just
Yeah.
don't notice those inconveniences until you are kind of
I
looking
mean,
at them
how
from the
overlooked is that? Remember
outside.
going to Trader Joe's and you're like, I don't even want to get groceries anymore. Like,
Right, like,
I'm gonna just
it's too
turn.
hard.
It's funny. It's so true that we'll get. I'm glad you have parking. I mean, that makes all the difference. That's
Yeah,
funny. Well, that's wonderful, though. I think that's good to see the different perspectives, and I think next chapter is residency, of course, and you. I know it's a matter of just matching, right, and figuring out where
mhm.
what comes next, where you're going to be, what program suits your needs. Um, so I guess I'm sure it's a question mark, but if you had to choose one residency program right now, just
Yeah, that's hard. I will say when I came to Duke, I was like, "There's no way I will just do 4 years and then I'll head out." Oh, you may be cutting out a little, but it may be my
I got you.
Wi-Fi.
Can you see me?
You're a little fuzzy, but it's okay.
Okay.
Basically, I didn't think I'd want to stay at Duke for residency just because it was such a jump from San Francisco to Durham. But
Mhm.
now I could say could be very happy here, staying for residency. But in terms of like a dream program, I'm not entirely sure. Um, I think on the table would be to stay at Duke or go back to California. There are great institutions there, so it's hard to narrow it down. Or go to Colorado, which is where I grew up. So those are kind of my
Right.
3 points where I'm like, oh, that could be potentially a good place to be. But
Absolutely.
again, I'm very much open to the spontaneity and all of that that comes with going into medicine and going into kind of graduate school stuff.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, that's wonderful. And seeing you, hearing about how you've just gone through these years and continued to do it at your pace and do it the way that you want to do it and really get these great experiences. I think that it's really cool to see. I mean, you've been at great institutions. And it's going to be exciting to see what the next couple of years hold. And very, very cool. Very, very cool. One thing that I wanted to chat on in this conversation too was the internship that you had early on in your undergraduate. And I know we're kind of going out of chronology here, but that NASA internship, did that have anything to do with medical stuff at all? Or what was that? How'd you get involved in that?
What was that? No, nothing to do with medicine. I will say that was the kind of opportunity where you kind of see it come across your desk or whatever, and you're like, that would be really cool. I'm very interested in that. Not super applicable to my life goals and ambitions, but you know what? Like, this is maybe a detour or maybe something that I end up falling in love with. Let me give it a shot. If it doesn't work out,
Right.
nothing hurt. And so I ended up, taking the internship and I was a launch intern, which basically means I had very, very little work to do until there was like a launch I was assigned to. And so it was great it's kind of built for people who are concurrently in undergrad or, in graduate school. And so I just kind of got to go and be not really a part because I wasn't doing much at the launches, but basically shadow those who were doing important things at launches. And it was really great. Just being
Wow.
exposed to, aerospace and all of that crazy stuff that happens over there. And I will say that I haven't thought about that in a long time, but one way that it kind of connects with what I'm doing now is I think it can feel very easy to get pressured into not deviating from this kind of stereotyped path of going into medicine. And so then I need, 1,200 hours of shadowing. I need however many hours of volunteering at a hospital. I can say I had neither of those. um, and I think it's okay to let yourself kind of pursue those opportunities as they come to you, because as long as you can string them together in your application for, graduate school, whatever that next step may be for you, as long as you can string together these experiences in a way that demonstrates what you've learned from them in meaningful ways and how you can apply what you've learned to your future. It's There's not really something that you can do wrong necessarily, and I think that's an important thing I
Absolutely.
would have loved to tell myself to not stress out about my younger self.
Absolutely. Well, you just said it best. I mean, that's really good advice that your experiences make you and only you've had your experiences. And that doesn't discredit where you hope to go and what you hope to achieve with them. Like you said, string them together in a way that shows how fit you are to do that next thing and be a part of that program or go to that school or whatever it might be. um, I think you're right. A lot of people can get wrapped up in the idea that you have to follow one strict path. I remember I was all hedge fund, Wall Street, like, what do I need to do? It was just, it was overwhelming. It's overwhelming. And you stop being yourself, you
Mhm.
just kind of stop being yourself. So that's awesome that you took that detour, um, and explored it. And, who knows what it could have turned into, but now you've
Yeah.
got a really neat experience under your belt. Like,
Right,
wow.
and there's actually now an emerging space medical fellowship after residency. Should I wanna go
Really?
into space medicine, I have, like, a unique tie back. So, I don't really see myself
Absolutely.
doing that, but potentially, I could.
Yeah. Yeah, you never know how that could come together. That's really neat. That's a neat field as well. Space right now is
Mhm.
just, it's interesting. There was a gal we had on here that's really passionate about space medicine actually.
See?
So
Yeah, it's
yeah,
great.
absolutely. Yeah, you just never know what's out there. That's awesome. That's really cool, Jen. Well, um, I think it's nice to hear your path, and it's nice to have you share with other people because it's everyone's got such unique experiences to share. So thank you for doing this and coming on today. We're gonna close it up now with a rapid fire round, and we're gonna ask you a couple questions. So whatever comes to mind, just go ahead and shoot back.
Okay, sure.
Um, First question for you: what is your favorite book?
Harry Potter, but only because I'm a big nostalgia reader, and I when I'm overstimulated with work or school or whatever, I like to kinda turn back to something I know, and I know
Hmm.
Harry Potter, like, I
You
know it
know
covered.
Harry Potter. What house are you in Harry Potter?
How what? Sorry?
What house are you?
Oh, see, I think I used to be Gryffindor, but I think I've come to terms with the fact that I'm Ravenclaw.
Ooh, okay. Good deal. Good deal. Well, which Harry Potter volume would you suggest?
Honestly, I think you gotta just when you start, you just gotta read through the whole thing. So if you're rereading, just start over and read through the whole thing again, or listen to the
Oh my
audiobooks
gosh.
because I'm a big audiobook gal, and that is a great way to get that nostalgia kick again.
That's awesome. That's so cool. I love it. Okay, next question for you. Who is your most influential role model?
This is hard. I would say, like I mentioned her earlier, my PI from undergrad, Lydia San, is definitely one of them. I think also I will plug that you can have different kind of mentors and you can love them for reasons and you can kind of resent them for other reasons. And
Hmm.
so, this wasn't my experience with Lydia at all, but I will say that like take what you can from a mentor and then be okay with the fact that your next mentor will be different, right? That maybe some projects you had a very hands-on mentor that helped you through every single step, and then the next time you have a new mentor for a different field or whatever, maybe they're very hands-off and you got to learn a lot on your own, but you get a lot of opportunity to grow. So I think it's hard for me to pick one because I've had such diverse mentorship, but if
Yeah,
I did have to choose one, it'd be Lydia.
that's nice. That's really nice. And I think that's another good point that you just mentioned there, that mentor doesn't mean you have to ride into the sunset with them. It's there's so many great people out there that can offer you so much help.
Right.
Um, and you can learn so much from so many different people. So I like that answer a lot. And shout out to Lydia. Um, Next question. Being a student, what is the most stressful part of your day, day in and day out?
I would say, like I said, you might hear my cat in the background, so apologies for that. But my most stressful day to day, I probably just learning to say no to things because ever since I got to Duke, and I think at any medical school it'll be the same, a million opportunities are thrown at you. So like, there'll be a interest group meeting, some sort of service opportunity, a new course that you can take, all this stuff thrown at you, and you have to decide what you want or don't do any of it. And learning to say no to things has been very stressful for me. But I'm learning, and it's getting better.
Absolutely. At all levels, it's hard to say no, especially if so if you're a social person, and
Mhm.
it's tough. It's really tough. So good advice. Next question. Who is someone that you've studied with? Who's the favorite person that you've studied with?
Ooh, this is also good. I would say during organic chemistry, I had a really good friend named Sneha, and I guess maybe it was more trauma bonding because we were taking organic chemistry, but we had a good relationship where she was far more knowledgeable than me, but I had kind of a little bit maybe different of a background in terms of courses I'd taken before. And so we had this good back and forth of where basically she would teach me a lot. and I would learn a lot, and then I would teach her a little, and she would learn a little. So it was a good, in my opinion, great give and take. Probably a little imbalanced, but I think anytime you can have that role where you get to teach someone something, you learn it better yourself. So that was a great. Um, she was a great partner for that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Well, next question. What would you say the most meaningful way it what would you say the most meaningful way for students to help each other is?
Oh, this piggybacks good off of the last one. I think just collaborating, utilizing each other's strengths to help kind of fill in those weaknesses is perfect. I think it can be hard, particularly for pre meds, because it's kind of competitive. It tends to be kind of like my gains are your losses kind of thing.
Right, right, I
And
get that.
so avoiding that mindset at all costs is great, and collaborating is even better. So.
Love that answer. Great. Big question. What is your biggest hope to accomplish during your time on Earth?
This is very profound. I would say I don't really know. My answer is probably I don't know, but I will say, generally speaking, I would like to leave my people and my places better than I found them. And so I think you can define people and places in many ways, but that will be my generic answer to avoid getting too deep and going into a therapy session.
Yeah, let's avoid that. We're rapid fire. But no, I love that answer. Leaving things better than you found them. Perfect. Um, Next question. What do you think the purpose of undergraduate studies are, and what do you think the purpose of graduate studies are?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think undergrad can oftentimes, and graduate school too, can feel like kind of just a path to get you where you're going, and it doesn't really matter so much what's happening in here as long as it gets you to where you want to go. I would say trying to avoid that mindset and taking in actually everything, growing as a human being as well as intellectually in both grad school and undergrad is very, very important. And so I would say they are kind of a means to an end, but soaking up as much as you can in terms of obviously intellectual growth because you're taking classes and you're paying to be there.
Hmm.
But also, being a better person and growing that kind of humanistic side of yourself is vital too. So they're important for getting you to where you need to be, but also growing you as a person.
I love that. Wonderful. And last question is what is your top piece of advice for those who are early in their educational journey?
Yeah, I would say be patient with yourself. Don't feel so rushed. I know it's probably going to fall on deaf ears, but like give yourself a chance and try not to compare yourself too much to others. I think regardless, you're probably going to, and that's okay. But just keep in mind that the piece of yourself that you're comparing to everyone else is like comparing your day to day with their highlight reel, right? And so it's not a fair comparison. And so when you are going to compare yourself to others, because it's probably inevitably going to happen, just consider that there are some error bars that are pretty large on either side of whoever you're seeing that sometimes they may be even better than the person you see, and that's crazy. But most of the time, they're probably not this highlight reel that they show, through social media, that they show in an interview or whatever. So be gentle with yourself, be patient with yourself, and yeah, that's
I
probably.
love that. That's awesome advice. I think a lot of people need to hear that. Even if there's not students, I think everyone needs to hear that. So, Jen, thank you so much for coming on today. Where can people keep up with you? Where can they stay in tune with the journey that you are on?
Yeah, people are more than welcome to reach out to me through LinkedIn or through email. I'm happy to answer anyone who's on, pre-med journey and, taking detours or not, answer any questions there. My email is jen.hall@duke.edu. So reach out should anything come up. More than happy to chat.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jen, for coming on. This has been such a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
Cool. I'm gonna end this recording real quick.